Meeting to order.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Welcome to the February 7th Facilities and Finance Meeting. I would like to take roll call. Dr. Grande?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
And other members of the board, thank you for coming. I would like to move forward with the approval of January 3rd meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second? Thank you very much. We always start with our mission and vision statement. The agenda for tonight's meeting, we're going to be discussing King Field, LED monument signs, GKO status update with Kevin Gotchell will be presenting, and retro commissioning. We'll also be discussing projects that are out to bid. At the end, we'll take comments and questions. King Field updates. We had a few scheduled meetings with Field Turf and Bynum on the track surfacing. However, over the past couple of weeks, due to weather conditions, they have been postponed. Nick and myself are looking at scheduling another meeting as quickly as we can get both parties in. Stadium Solutions, they arrived on site on Monday to install the ADA ramps and handrails. They started doing some preliminary work on setting footings and setting sonotubes in for the ADA ramps on the home side. On the visitor side, they started making the adjustments to the aisles, making them bigger to meet the ADA requirements, as well as starting doing some of the preliminary work for the handrails. Footings are going to be poured tomorrow. Those footings will be blanketed and then also layered with blankets of insulation. Their plan is to be back in a week to start installing the ADA ramps on the home side. So a long time in coming, but they're here. The monument signs for the high school and middle school. Tentatively, weather permitting, KC Signs would like to set the new poles in this Friday at both locations. Installation will follow approximately 2 weeks later on the 26th. Fencing, today we ran into a little bit of a glitch. Transparency totally here. Our vendor came back with an adjustment in pricing, which far exceeded the second bidder's pricing. I reached out to the second bidder, Northeast Sign, asked them if they would still hold their bid from September 11th. They said yes. So I have to get some information over to Kiwanis Group tomorrow to get a new PO addressed for the second place bidder and cancel the PO to A&U. Electrical runs will be forthcoming, as well as I haven't heard back from the power company yet on setting the meter at the high school. It was determined that it would be much cheaper and cost effective to put an additional meter on the pole rather than trenching all the way into the school to run power for the new sign. If I could introduce Kevin. Kevin's going to do a little bit of an update of where we are with the feasibility study.
Great, thank you, Bob. So I want to start off just by talking about the issue of consistency. And I know that that's been raised at the board level. I think it's certainly been raised at the administration level. There are 6 firms coming together to put this feasibility study together. And the goal is to make sure that when it gets published, it looks like it was published by one. So in that order, we've invested a little bit of upfront time, making sure that we're going to have that consistency. We've had 2 meetings to identify how that report's going to be prepared, to go through different scenarios that we might encounter. There's one building, but it's from 3 different eras of construction. So how do you evaluate that? What would be the format of how we break that down? And how do we evaluate things like a condition-related thing, like that door looks old, that one doesn't, but a door like that looks old, and a door like that does not function. it's two different issues, right? One of them is aesthetic and one of them is it doing the job that it's supposed to do or not? So we've had a lot of conversations about that. And we put together a standard format. We basically took one of the schools, we took Swarthmore Rutledge, because we'd already done a report for that. And we said, this is the format. This is the format that everybody's going to follow. Secondly, to make sure that it looks like it's produced by one company, everything is going to flow through GKO. So we are taking Nick's report, we are taking our mechanical electrical report, we're taking Crabtree's report. We are going to be the ones to actually format all that and make sure that it's coming off as a consistent report. So I think we've made good steps towards making sure that we have that consistency. Did we jump ahead a slide? I'm sorry. So in terms of the different categories, every item is going to be evaluated. Every item is going to have a general description of what it is. We're going to list the manufacturer and model number as that information is available. So it will be available for a hot water heater. It might be a little harder to find on a Windows system. It'll be impossible to find, but when that information is available, we'll make sure that that's in the report. We will report the approximate year of installation. We'll be specific if we know. We'll generalize if we're reading the context of the building. We will talk about its current age and its life expectancy. Every element will get an evaluation of good, fair, or poor condition. So we could probably expand that. There's probably 10 different adjectives that you could use to describe a system, but we're going to get it down to those three so that we can better categorize, the different elements. We are going to talk about maintenance and energy requirements for upkeep. So there might be systems that are in fine condition, but if they're not energy efficient, that should be reported, even though it might not be a condition, but it could just be an opportunity for improved efficiency. Lighting would be the big category. Might be completely functioning, but may not be nearly as efficient. Everything will get a recommendation. We're either going to retain it, we're going to improve it, or we're going to replace it. So we're going to put everything into those three categories. And then we're going to break everything down in terms of prioritization. Is it on the 3-year plan? Is it on the 5-year plan? Is it on the 10-year plan? We've actually talked about in our budget when we report, the price tag for that item will go into one of those three categories. And then we can always later say, okay, instead of the 3-year, let's move that one into the 5-year, and it'll retally the total. So we'll be able to sort of work with that document and get ourselves into a manageable 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plan based on where we put those different elements. And then, of course, we're looking at any building code issues and possible code updates if we find those. So what's been completed to date? We have gone through, GKO has gone through and done Strathaven Middle School. We've done an initial walkthrough. We started with that facility because we were the designers of Wallingford and Nether Providence. We know those buildings pretty well, and we have done some work in Swarthmore Rutledge. So we decided to start with the one we didn't know. Now, this building is really in pretty good condition. So if I came to you and said, what was the biggest surprise we found, or what was the shocking element? I don't really have anything at this point. From the standpoint of the general construction elements, is really in pretty good condition. The architectural and mechanical surveys for the high school have been done, and we have started our write-up of this building. So that report is in process that they've developed. You'll notice as we plan for the future, starting in February, you'll notice that the dates that we're picking up are very likely your in-service days. What we really like is when the building is completely empty and we're able to just sort of flow through without interrupting the education. It's not really a linear process. I find when I'm going through, you might do one classroom, a second classroom, on the third classroom, you see something you didn't see in the first two. And so you start backtracking, and you start seeing, is this running all the way through, or is it one-off? So we kind of hop around a lot, and it's really great to have a full day with the building. So on the first, I believe the mechanical survey of the middle school was done. Our engineers were out last week. On the 16th, we GKO intend to go to Swarthmore, Rutledge, and Wallingford. And I believe our mechanical engineer is joining us. So that's going to be a big bang. We're going to get 2 schools, both the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the general construction. And I believe that Crabtree is targeting the end of February for the write-up of the high school. And then for March, again, we're hitting the in-service days. We're going to go to another Providence Elementary. And at the end of March, on the 20th, we're targeting to have SRS and Wallingford draft reports completed. And then in April, finishing up with the write-up for NPE. The final project, the study is supposed to be completed in June 21st of this year. So we're just sort of marching through every month, hitting that in service day and trying to go through it. So that's essentially where we are. I think certainly we've made progress. It's coming along. I think everybody knows their parts, and I would also say that when we have those meetings, there's 6 different companies in the room, plus the school district. And Nick, I think you would agree, there's no egos in the room. Yeah. I think everyone just wants to work together and do the best job.
And just to add, the structure that we came up with, sort of like an Excel spreadsheet, will allow us to dump that data into FMX. So we wanted to get that so we could configure it so it'd be an easy dump in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it's good.
We're gonna go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, can we?
Yeah.
Can we go through? it?
Yeah, let's
We're
finish
gonna
up
go
and
that
then
way.
if there's questions.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, fantastic. As we look at prioritizing PM and repairs based upon the CM3 report, presently right now, as you are aware, we don't have all the data. We're still missing 40% of the schools. However, based on the knowledge we have now and talking it over as a group, we'll really look at our first targets would be the middle school and SRS. As we gain some more data, we can then look at reallocating those dollars if we happen to have something that really pops out as a failure that needs to get done, and looking at in our menu of all of the equipment that we have and really prioritize where if we have something at West or something that really pops out at the high school even that is totally down in an area, then we'll just reallocate dollars from one to the other. But what we're looking at right now, based upon regular time, no overtime, weekends, about 1.592 for just doing the SRS and the middle school. If we have to go to the point of working some overtime hours, weekend hours, we're going to be adding about $210,000 to it. So when you look at that revised number would be 1.802. Tawanda and I have sat down, we're, tentatively projecting a number that we can utilize to start those repairs. And once we peel that onion back a little bit more and put all that data into spreadsheets to really look at the cost per unit, and then be able to figure out exactly what is the most important units to target moving forward. The projects that we have out to bid right now is the NPE partial roof replacement, the baseball and softball dugouts for the middle school and high school, and the batting cages, the dual cage at the high school, which would be placed down by the dog leg, and a single cage over at NPE. Tomorrow we have our bid walkthroughs. We sectioned them all for one day, so we'll be going from one to the other to the other. We've had some pretty good correspondence with some vendors. I know I've had discussions with at least 3 roofing companies that are interested in bidding. Nick's had a few. Same thing with the dugouts. We've had a few vendors coming in. So hopefully we'll get some good numbers to be able to play with, not just 1 or 2 vendors, to give us a good look on bidding. And then we'll be able to present those bid numbers to you. Let me move to the next slide, it'll be easier. Our pre-bid walkthrough is on the 8th. The bid advertising has to be over 3 weeks. So it came out on the 26th, the 29th, and the 5th. The sealed bids are due the 16th, and we'll be having a bid opening that afternoon at the Spencer House. Those bids at March 16th will be discussed at the facilities meeting. And hopefully we'll get to present those bids the proposals for March 18th. Our project start date is targeted for June 17th with a completion of August 16th. We want to give us enough time, especially on the roofing project, to get that done before any kids are in. Occasionally, there is the issue where you have maybe some fascia work, metal work that lags behind, but that doesn't affect, won't affect the students whatsoever. You're not pouring hot asphalt or anything where you don't want to start moving kids around the building. It just, doesn't add to the educational experience for our students. Dr. Brumley, would you like to start? With any questions that you might have for myself or for Kevin?
Sure, I just have a quick question on the 1.802, the prioritized PM and repairs. You have contingency built into that, or when you start peeling away, could that creep?
That's gonna, there is no contingency on that number, so you're really gonna have to add that 8% or so to that and really start to peel the onion back when we look at that spreadsheet and start to dig in. Now, that estimate is for one vendor, CM3. You know, as a group, the board's gonna need to decide to give direction that says, you know what, it's 1.8. Maybe we get that spreadsheet together and go out to bid. You know, it's depending on what the board directions will gonna want to do. They'll probably get some better pricing, hopefully, but when we start to look at it, we go from there.
Quick question. Thank you, Kevin, for that update. Appreciate that. Bob, easy question for you. We're talking about the monuments that are being replaced.
Yes.
I noticed, I'm sure this has been thought of, but the old ones, there's a plan to tear those down?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Would you like
You
to
want to take a
first?
swing at it?
What, say that again? No,
Would you
no,
like to first?
no, it's one of those obvious things that you put up new ones and said, no one ever thought about the old
Oh,
ones.
no.
What do you do with that? But I'm assuming there's a plan to take those.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Well, I do know, if I may, that there has been staff members over the last 26 years who've been responsible for going out through rain, sleet, or snow. I went out there because I wanted to have that experience with her. And I said, please tell me you have been doing this for 23 years. It is a precarious and very scary situation. And it was dry. And I thought to myself, you come out here when there's snow, you come out here when it's raining, and you gotta lift that thing up, hold this so it doesn't come crashing on top of your head, and manually take these little blocks of letters and slide them through. So, I shared with her, there's not thank yous, but what I can do is that, I will allow you to sit on that bulldozer. And you can be the first person to push the button to swing it.
That would be good.
In terms of, you no longer will have to do that. You'll have a computer in front of you and you can do that anywhere you would like from that process. So, when you talked about keeping a brick, I'm not sure if there are something she would like to keep, but I definitely said to her, listen, if you've been out here for 23 plus years doing this, then yes.
Sure.
We definitely are gonna make sure that, you get the first swing.
Yeah. You have all the letters.
Yes.
Dr. Marseille and I also discussed, maybe we might make some sort of a plaque or something like that with a part of it that we could present to her, sort of like, hey, get a piece of it
Yeah.
from the arena,
Yes.
something along that
I'd
line.
like to see, yeah, that'd be cool.
Got a nice paperweight.
That's it for me.
Okay, just for context, could you just explain, how this feasibility study that we're talking about now relates to, what we heard 2 months ago about the condition assessment and how these processes are related?
Well, what Kevin is doing, because we have CM3 as one of the partners in the meeting, is gonna be rolling that 1,600 pages of data into the assessment report and then utilizing a lot of that data. So we had that in-depth data. Kevin's data is more on a higher level. I shouldn't say higher level, but a reduced good, better, poor consensus. That will all be rolled into one report, so we're utilizing that data as well. So it's not two, we're not going down two separate bins.
So, follow-up question on that. When you look at that, Kevin, when you're looking at the different study updates and the survey, including the recommendation on improved repair or replacement, is that going to be based on some sort of rubric that is from the other pieces? Or is that like the assessment of the person in the moment? You know, there's like, we have good, fair, poor condition, year installed, maintenance required, like the energy's back. Like, are there
I would say.
formula that tip which one you say keep, replace, repair?
So I don't know if there's necessarily a formula, so we'll be evaluated by the particular engineer looking at that component. But I would think that, I would describe it more that within the 10-year context of the timeline for looking forward, what needs to happen in that component. It's either adequate to be retained through that 10-year period, it should be improved in this way through the 10-year period, or it should be replaced. You know, and it's really a matter of if somebody willing to say 10 years from now, that component in its current condition will be acceptable. And if the answer is no, then it has to fall into one of those two categories, improve it or replace it. And then again, later we'll talk about the timeline. Is that 3-year, 5-year?
Other board members, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Yes, please.
Leo Perry, Siteland, Wallingford. I always apologize for asking such small questions when we're talking about millions. So Ms. Mosley, did we ever get the $10,000 from the foundation?
I can double check on that for you.
I was going to check and I
For the
didn't.
capital, you talk about.
Well, for dugouts, I'm sorry. It was particularly earmarked by baseball parents and friends, including myself, for dugouts. And the last I saw was $10,000.
They didn't commit to that, but we can confirm, being committed to it, but we confirm that.
Well, I'll try and make a call and see. That was my first question. My second question is, I sent a number of you an email regarding the dugouts and their placement and sight lines to home plate. And I'm wondering if, or whomever, Bob, if that's been taken into consideration.
We are looking at that, as well as we might have to move the stands a little bit to improve that line of sight.
That would be appreciated.
Yes.
And, you know, the scoreboard placement is kind of odd. It's behind the home plate bleachers. So if you want to see balls and strikes, you gotta keep turning around, but that, I don't expect that to be moved. The final thing, you said something about, a batting cage being placed in the dog leg. Where's the dog leg?
See, I'm new to this and everyone tells a dog leg. And when I first came here, that was my first ad. Where is the dog leg? When you go behind the gym,
Oh, but that's for the softball.
that's for the softball.
And,
NPE will get a batting cage. They started to put one in approximately over the 2 years ago. Okay, thank you. And, it never got fully erected, so that's part of the bid to get this one fully erected.
so the baseball one, which I think you call the middle school or the high school field,
That's staying where it is.
okay, it's just gonna, replace or
No,
remodel?
it's staying as is,
Oh,
and, Linnell and I can talk about down the road of maybe it needs a new net,
yeah,
but
okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Dave Sartor on Ward's Wing, Wallingford. Do we have a ballpark or a range of what we think the roof replacement will be, the dugouts and the?
Our estimate is probably between 5 and 7. We'll see where the bids come in,
I'm sorry,
500 and 700K,
for all those items or the?
Just the roof.
Just
just the roof.
the roof.
And that's an estimate. We'll see.
No, I get that. And then the dugouts,
The dugouts, our estimate is around 140K for the 4 of them.
okay. And then lastly, does that include the cages or?
No, and the cages, I think, Nick, was it 35? I think it was 35K was our estimate.
So the potential for those projects, I'm just going to high numbers, is like $900,000 maybe.
And just be aware that then the dugouts, those dugouts then will not include benches, helmet holders, bat holders, that would be additional.
Okay, and the reason why I just asked, I'm not gonna get into all of it here, since people don't know what I handed out earlier, but I gave the 3 board members who are on the committee, Luana and yourself, what you've been talking about for the last few months with respect to the recommissioning and some of the other things that are going on that we are looking at addressing. And I made my own recommendation, and that's what I provided the board members and yourself to just look at. And in a perfect world, if there was nothing else, and I know there's other things on the list, all these other schools you still have to look at. But in a perfect world, if these were all the things we needed to take care of, we currently, as according to my math, if you remove the CASA money from the capital reserve, you have just about enough money to do all these items. And like I said, I know it's not a perfect world, but we've been talking for years about getting things fixed. And my attitude has always been, if we've got the money and we've taken it from the taxpayers, let's stop talking about it and see what we can do to make the facilities what we need them to be. So I just made my recommendation tonight, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't need it.
No, thank you very much, and that's what I'm tasked to do. Make sure it gets repaired correctly and improve the, conditions of every building here.
And lastly, no me doing that, I don't wanna sound obnoxious or anything like that. But my 10 years on the board, all those 10 years was as the facility subcommittee chair. So I'm familiar with the buildings. I understand lots of stuff's going on all the time. Things break all the time. But we try to grasp what we have, what we need to fix, the money we currently have, and do the best we can. And it's just a suggestion. That's all. Thanks.
That's our goal. Do we have any other questions? No. Gonna call a close, meeting. I'm sorry, thank you.
Well, our next meeting, while we do that, there you go.
Our next meeting will be March 6th, here in B226 at 7 PM. We can take a
Quick 5-minute break. Yep.
5-minute break.
All right, we're gonna call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February seventh Finance Committee meeting. At this time, I'd like to take roll call. Dr. Grande. Here. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Henry.
Here.
And I also want to acknowledge other board members that are present. As always, the district commission and vision statement, which guides the work that we do every day. Here reflected is the agenda for today's meeting. The committee did have a chance to review the January 3rd and January 16 minutes. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve January 13th, 3rd first.
So moved.
Thank you. And can I have a motion to approve January 16th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Before I actually get into the agenda, I did want to make some references to the governor's proposed budget address from yesterday. I just want to highlight some things that he discussed. He did mention the state had a improvement in their credit rating across all three agencies. That credit rating improvement actually was saved the taxpayers about $100 million that would have gone to banks and investment firms. The state is expected to have a $14 billion surplus at the end of this fiscal year. To quote him, that is not something to brag about. Just like everyday people, the state must plan for emergencies. However, he did stress the importance of making sure we're pushing some of that money back out specifically to education. But the biggest takeaway, of course, is the unfair funding formula that was deemed unconstitutional. So the biggest focus, of course, is going to be making sure the basic ed subsidy conversation. He did mention proposing that no schools receive less than what they did this year. And I would like to mention that Wallingford received less than what the governor proposed in March of 2023. So I just wanted to mention that before I go any further. It was proposed that $1.1 billion of new funding will go towards schools. However, about $900 million will be reserved specifically to address the unfair funding formula. So that's going to be going to the schools that are more in need than us, to be honest. $50 million increase in special education. But the reason I wanted to mention that, like, again, if that's what the state is going to be focusing on, that unfair funding formula, as a school district that has a pretty, median average income, that's what the funding formula was based on. That is something to think about for us. When we talk about that additional funding, we're probably not one of the school districts that will benefit mostly from the, new funding formula. And like I said, it should be mentioned that we received less than what we proposed last year. So I kind of just wanted to put that in perspective for us. There's a lot more funding that will go into competitive grants, but again, that is something we have to apply for and to consider. So that's just something I wanted to mention as it relates to the governor's budget address. To go into some department updates, first I wanted to mention that the business office did finalize quarter and year-end responsibilities. W-2s, which are legally required to be mailed out by January 31st, we were able to send them out on January 19th. All of our payroll, quarterlies and year-end responsibilities and reconciliations were complete. The only outstanding requirement we still have are to upload the 1099s to the IRS. That was because you actually have online access, and if you do not electronically file for 2 consecutive years, the feds will remove your online access. So when we actually went to go upload them, that's what we found out, our status was removed. So we actually had to apply for that to happen. State said, the Fed said it takes about 45 days, but again, they were bombarded. They're kind of being very convenient with that process. So that's the only calendar year and responsibility we still have outstanding. For the first time in over a year, we will be fully staffed. Our payroll clerk started on January 8th. She has become very acclimated with our system. I was very surprised that in our e-finance system, the business office didn't have a testing site. That's something we actually contacted Power School and added. So the best part about that is she's been becoming acclimated with our e-finance system. She's been mirroring the last 2 payrolls we had, and she's learning, receiving that training, and it's not impacting in the real life situation. So it's been going very well. Our assistant DA, that process actually went very quickly. We posted the job. We had second round interviews. We offered the position and the person accepted. He's actually going to start today. So like I said, the first time in over a year, we'll be fully staffed. Best part about him, he actually was a business manager. We have 2 business managers in your business office. He's coming from a much smaller school district where their overall budget is about $23 million. But again, has full experience as far as audits, how to do the AFR, all of the big high level tasks that a business officer do. He has experience. So I think that really puts us in a great situation. Phase 3 of our 24-25 budget, process was completed. Just a reminder, and I'll go into more detail later, the, phase 3 is where we received all other budget requests outside of, remember, phase 1. Like I said, I'll go into a little bit more detail. Phase 1 was our mandated obligations. Phase 2 was related to the strategic plan. Phase 3 was everything else excluding a recommended personnel. That information was combined with phase 1, creates basically our preliminary budget outside of our contract negotiations with WSEA. And the last one, probably the big one, for the first time in more than 3 years, we are current on all of our grant quarterly reports. The only grant obligations we have outstanding are our Title II and 4 fiscal 23 financial expenditure report. That's the final report you submit to the state after the grant is over. The reason those have not been completed, the state only allows you a 20% variance of what you wrote in the grant and how you spent it. In some cases, the district spent a little more, a little less. They will not allow you to submit that financial expenditure report, so we just have to do a budget modification, and then we'll be able to submit those reports. But again, that's allowable. It's nothing that was problematic. We just have to update that so we can properly submit those reports. But currently, all of our current grants we're current on those reports. So then I'm going to specifically go into contracts first. We do have about 11 contracts. We have 11 contracts that was shared with the board. Like I said, what I've been trying to do is provide 5 focal points to kind of help the board just have a better understanding of everything exactly with the contract that exists. The 5 questions I've been asking each administrator to submit is the expected expiration date, the cost that is not to exceed. Tell me something about the company in general. Tell me what products or services they're going to be providing our district, and then how does our district benefit from receiving those products or services. So the first one is Solution Trade. Like I said, not to exceed 13,000. They're going to be providing professional development, in-person workshops in support of the PLC as part of the strategic plan. Second contract is for Newman University. This is for our graduation ceremony. Contract number 3 is VoIP Networks. They're going to be providing support and software upgrades to our internal our phone switches. Number 4 is CDI LLC. They're currently working with other districts. They will be helping implementing Microsoft Intune and Windows Autopilot. Again, the district currently has about 1,500 devices that kind of receive that annual maintenance and updates. Number 5 is Allegheny Intermediate Unit. It's more of an MOU. That's we're participating in that joint purchasing for TransPerfect. Like I said, anytime we need translation services, they provide that support. And like I said, anytime we have a joint purchasing through one of the IUs, we get that collective discount rate. Number 6 is for Arbiter Sports, approximately $10,000. This is something they're going to look to do annually. This allows for secure and seamless management of athletic paperwork. So right now, anytime kids have to submit physicals or any of that paperwork, and it's actual paper documents that coaches and the athletic department has to track, this allows you to do everything electronically and let the coaches actually have access, like on the go. So if we're at a game, I have my roster, I have all of my students, my athletes, I have access to their information. And like I said, that cost for that is not to exceed $10,000. I do want to mention, because you may have seen Arbiter Sports on the bills list or something like that, they have another portion where we pay our referees directly online. So I just wanted to make that clear. If you see Arbiter Sports somewhere else, like I thought it was supposed to say it's only $10,000. When we have tournaments, we can schedule the rest right online and then pay them directly online. This is a whole separate portion. This is the family ID. Number 7 is Barksdale. This is just a master agreement for school pictures and for the yearbook. Again, that's no cost to the district. Those families pay directly for the pictures that they want. Willow Grove Service, this is a contract not to exceed about $7,800. They provide preventative maintenance. Again, we know that's been a focus that we've been discussing with all of the deferred maintenance that the district has to address. Bob has done, Mr. Maloney has done a great job of contacting some vendors so we can set certain preventative maintenance for their specialties. In the contract, you'll see for Schedule A and B, what their particular service that they'll be providing. Bus patrol is a 5-year agreement. It starts at the date of the violation notice, so it don't have an official expiration date. However, when that first ticket is written, that will be the date of the contract, and then it's 5 years from there that our contract will be in existence. Again, it's no cost to the district, which is amazing. Penn Power Group, this expires in June of 2025. Cost not to exceed $9,200 in either year. This year it's a little cheaper. But again, this is another preventative maintenance service that they'll be providing specifically for the district's generators. And then the last agreement is Chester County Intermediate Unit. This is contract pricing through June of 2024. As you see in one of the attachments, they have a wide variety of services that they provide. Again, we're going through the IU, so we're able to get some of the discounted services. But this is more so based off our student services and our special education needs. So those are the contracts that will be presented to the board at the meeting later this month. Then I wanted to highlight specifically what thought process and just to reiterate what went into building the 24-25 budget. Again, just a reminder of what each phase is. Phase 1 was for us to identify our mandated expenditures. So we thoroughly reviewed all of the district's existing contracts. I have been making some recommendations to Dr. Marseille to better improve that process. And again, once we're at that point, and it's properly presented to him, we'll be presented to the board. But we wanted to use that phase to capture our rising contractual costs and non-negotiable. So just give you a brief example. Again, it's already an existing contract right now. For our Mets, this year, we paid them a little over $1 million. Next year, that cost is already set at $1,094,000. That is something we needed to capture, because again, the cost is naturally higher. It's already in the agreement. That's really a non-negotiable for us. And then we also wanted to capture our other non-negotiable operating costs, so like our debt service. Again, we know exactly the amount we have to pay next year. Charter tuition, we know the number of students we have enrolled in charter schools. That price can vary a little based on once we complete that 363, but again, we have students that go there, so we know that's a set cost. And then some of our other obligated educational expenses, just like our education service agreements. Those are legally binding agreements, so whatever the district agreed to, we're on the hook for that cost. So that's what phase 1 was. Let's identify everything that we are obligated to pay. Phase 2 was to identify expenditures necessary to implement strategic plan initiatives. Each budget manager submitted proposals and significant rationale regarding why they need these specific expenditures. And like I said, we wanted to identify those. So it's not necessarily an added expenditure for the district year to year. It's also something that we can properly budget for. Phase 3, as I said, were all of our other budget expenditures, including personnel. Recommendations. So this was to identify everyday expenditures for your department. So natural supplies that they need at the school, any other like software or books that they may purchase. This was just all of your everyday expenditures. Our phase 1 and phase 3, like I said, combined make up our preliminary budget for each department. And then phase 4, which has not been presented to our budget managers, is recommended personnel requests. Again, this is last because this is only what funds we have available after we address all of our obligated and mandated needs that we need to just operate the district. Secondly, I want to address the groundwork that went into building this budget. Again, as a new person coming in, I had a lot to learn just about how the district operate. And like I said, hearing some things that needed to be improved in the business office, that a lot of that went to the focus. So the first thing that was done was we analyzed the district's use of the chart of accounts. I know you guys have probably heard me say that at least maybe 100 times since I've been here, but how important it is. The PDE updates that chart of accounts maybe once or twice every year. It's also important to know it's so detailed. It specifically provides where something should be coded based on where it is. It's literally like a dictionary. So if I say, let's just say we had to, just to give an example, we have students that we need to help get to school, we need to possibly do an Uber, public transportation. There's a code that says, it's not just your school bus, it's public transportation. It should be coded here. And again, like I said, it really helps us. And the reason I wanted to mention that, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the notes here. Everything that we submit to PDE is based on their chart of account, everything. So just to give you guys an example, our AFR quarterly reports, the transportation report, our social security and PSERS, those three things, transportation, social security, and PSERS, we actually receive money this is funding that we received from the state. So God forbid, if we're not coding things correctly and then reporting this things, we're actually missing out on potential revenue. So that coding is extremely important. So that's the first thing we did when we thought about building the budget, is to make sure everyone is coding things correctly. The second part was we did cost averages for 2-3 years of data, depending on if it was available. So we reviewed every single expenditure line item in everyone's budget. In some cases, I can honestly report full transparency. There were expenditures where the district didn't budget correctly. Give you a small example of that based off our obligations, not bad, Mrs. Saratory. But again, to give you an example, was our electric. You know, we need electric to run the district. We ran the 3-year cost average. The district has averaged spending $491,000 in electric. This year, we budgeted $430,000. That just didn't make sense. When you have data that shows you're spending $491,000, so that means, guess what? We're already going to be under budgeted in that area. And then there were other line items, not as big, but other line items where someone may have had historically $50,000 in their budget, and the 3-year average, they spend only $30,000 a year. So if you can't justify why you need 50, I ain't told them, you're getting 31. I'll be nice. I'll give you a little extra. But again, this information is being shared with the budget managers. Everything that they're going to receive, when they receive their preliminary budget, for some departments, it's actually less. But when we base it off the data and what you've been spending, this is what you've been spending. So the benefit of the district, we've been actually able to look at the existing money that's already allocated in the budget and reallocate it, so we're showing we're better serving the district and our students. We have support for every revenue and expenditure that you'll see in our budget. So these are not just made up numbers. We have supporting data going back 2 or 3 years. How did we come up with this dollar amount that we're considering budgeting for revenues? How did we come up with this expenditure? And that's gonna really, like I said, you guys know I'm very, when it comes to having support, that's gonna even for our budget managers. They say, well, I used to have 50,000, but you really don't need it. And here's the data to show that. And then lastly, what the focus is for our 24-25 budget is to establish it as our baseline. And full transparency, there may be some things that we under budget a little bit going into next year, and there may be some things we're going over. Again, we're trying to establish that baseline. It was a little difficult to do this year, again, because of the coding issues that the district had. It's very hard for me to look at a line item and things that should not have been budgeted there were. So again, a lot of legwork went into what you'll see in this actual budget, reviewing POs, reviewing invoices, finding where it should have been coded. So again, we're using this as our official baseline based off historical data. And that goes right into establishing a long-term mindset. Like I said, my personal goal is to establish a 3 to 5 year budget model for the district. We've been talking a lot about preventative maintenance and things we need to do in 1 or 2 years, things we need to do in 3 to 5 years. It is very important for us to establish this 3 to 5 year model. And I just have here some benefits of doing that. It increases your success of long-term goals to help convert those into implementable programs. Again, it helps you proactively plan internally. So what that means is for our department, they know year to year that my budget may increase by this amount, my budget may decrease by this amount. Just to give you an example, I know one of the things that he'll talk about is we want to talk about ensuring that our athletes have everything that they need. Certain things will be put on cycles. So to give you an example, if the district was to purchase uniforms, right? We have the number of sports that will purchase uniforms for this year. But the year we have to buy uniforms for football, which naturally has a lot of kids, that line item is naturally going to be higher. But again, if we know we have to buy football uniforms in 3 years, I know exactly that budget amount is going to be significantly higher. It also helps our administration continue to focus on the legwork that they have to do and reduce budget preparation time. Again, our administrators have a lot of work to do to have to actually sit. I commend them this year because what we implemented with the budget process required a lot of detail for me to just kind of know what's been going on, and they have to provide me a lot of that. But this is to help establish that baseline going forward. I already know what your mandated expenses are. I already know what that cost will be next year. I know what you spent historically for 3 years. It's going to really reduce that time that they need to put into building their budget. It reduces the probability of sacrificing necessities. The best example I can give for us is our preventative maintenance. Again, I know these are things, and in that report go back 10, 20 years. And I understand when we have a need and we have to make sure our students have exactly what they need today, it's very understandable how we may sacrifice other expenditures. So again, if we know exactly when things need to be repaired, when they need to be fixed, we can properly budget for them in those years. It also helps us strategically generate certain revenues. If I know in 2 years, we're gonna need this, we can seek certain grants, we can have certain financial campaigns to raise money for specific things. The best example I can give is the dugouts. That's something we know we had to do, that's a campaign that the district did, so we can strategically plan for revenues. And more importantly, it provides our residents with more certainty, confidence of services, finances, and tax law. Again, if they know possibly a year or two in advance exactly what the district is going to provide, that's going to create a lot of confidence of understanding the tax levels and adjustments that have to be made. So of course, that's always our biggest one. So that's, like I said, the thought process that went into building this budget, and now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Marseille, who's going to speak specifically to the district priorities going into the 24-25.
Thank you. I'd be remiss not to share, with those who are watching, those in the audience and on the board, how impressed I've been with, Ms. Mosley. Though you believe you're asking the right questions, you know, you realize maybe you should have been a little bit more specific in your question based on some of the things that we were finding. Challenging for many of our administrators because they didn't have to navigate particular tasks. So not knowing budget codes was extremely problematic because it was something to like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. And come to find out that, things were not coded correctly, which creates a nightmare from that process. So it is good for me, in the short amount of time that she's been here, the idea about how we're putting protocols and procedures together took a little bit longer for our teammates to kind of get used to. We had to send back to the drawing board several times. You need to go back and readjust your codes, go through your budget codes. This is what it looks like. I thought I did. I'm correct. Go back and do it again, right? So, but I think that practice better prepares individuals moving forward. I think the idea that there's obviously always room for improvement, right? But recognition of where we were and how we're moving forward deserves that, for me, that recognition. I appreciate that. I know that, vast majority of these were taking place when there was significant, challenges in the office in terms of, human capital, in terms of capacity. So, now that we are going to be operating, on full cylinders with the appropriate, individuals to provide that additional, support, I think it's, the best is yet to come in terms of the ways in which we're doing that. And obviously, that 3 to 5 year, budget outlook is something that, this board has been talking to me about since I got here. One of the interview questions, what ways are you gonna put together, a multi-year, budget as opposed to the way we've been doing it. And in order to complete that, we need to put the right people in the right positions, the right bus, and I think we're in a good place for that. So I wanted to take you through some slides and speak briefly, highlight some of the major budget areas in which I've been talking to Ms. Mosley about. And as you see on the slide, we have 5 major categories. And I want to address a couple of them and continue to go through the next 4 slides. And in those 5 categories, you know, our first commitment is, at the end of the day, to have a successful successor agreement with WSEA. With that, we wanted to present to the board and to WSEA a contract that is fair, that is financially responsible, understanding the conditions we are as a school system, but one that is extremely competitive with regards to salary and benefits. And that is because we are extremely high achieving school district, extremely competitive. There are very few school districts in that particular category. And those individuals are vying for those those superstars, inside our buildings, inside our classrooms. And with that, we want to make sure that, the contract represents our commitment to make sure that, we continue to attract, that we don't have a retention problem, retaining individuals, so, places who are looking to poach don't necessarily want to come here and do that as well, but obviously there's, what's more, much larger than salary, not why individuals do that, but we do want to make sure that we remain competitive, so, our attempts to commit to that is extremely important in this budget process, and we continue that. We've had a number of meetings that have been extremely fruitful and positive. Leadership has been, extremely thoughtful, in terms of their asks and understanding themselves where we are as a community. So I do want to give kudos to them for the work we're doing and that we want to do that. So the collective bargaining agreement is a big piece of building that budget. We also have a number of items with respects to our operations and technology. We do have, all the data suggests a number of fields that we need to restore. And I'll say this and mirror, Mr. Saratore's statement, in a perfect world, we would do all of these things, right? Because I'll show you some other slides. In a perfect world, we would provide all of those, but that's not our current condition. We do know that we need some of those to be addressed. So dollars have to be put forward to begin that particular process. We have some technology upgrades that, just like the Retro Commission report, you will soon hear from, AJ Centroni, a 5-year technology plan. And some of our smart boards, some of our flat screens have exceeded their useful life. We need to start putting a plan together to determine how we're going to move forward with that. Some of those, obviously the long-term plan, right? The way we're putting it together, Ms. Mosley, but others require, we need to fix these 4 or 5 things right away, in terms of the process. So it is a gradual release in terms of how we're doing this. The strategic plan, is extremely important in terms of all the data we've been collecting for a year and a half that moved us towards our 10-year vision, right? Not next year, the 10-year vision. We can't complete these goals in a short amount of time. It took us longer to get here. So part of that is thinking about some of the curricular and programmatic resources that we're going to need. In addition to that, part of those resources means that it is staffing, right? So from the curricular programming and the resources they're going to need, we're also going to need staff members to facilitate and support some of that. And I think what's really exciting is that not only brownie points, I've said this before, we have professionals, and we're fortunate to have professionals who are willing to do the work, who want to do the work, who want to partner and believe in the strategic plan. And when you have that, like the way in which when you have athletes who want to push it all the time, you got to give them the resources they need in order to do that. And what you'll hear moving forward is we need resources and we need time, right? We want to do the work, but we need resources and we need time. Obviously understand that we can't give them everything, but we want to do that as well. And then Ms. Mosley talked about our reimagining around the ways in which some of our athletic equipment and supplies we did not have, and trying to be as candid as respectful as possible. Our uniform rotation here for a district of this magnitude, to realize what we actually didn't provide athletes, that athletes were actually, parents were asked to give things that should be a part of that. I equate that to, we should be asking parents to purchase textbooks that drive the curriculum, right? Particular sets of uniforms or particular equipment is necessary to facilitate that particular process. So putting together a long-term plan in order to address that is extremely important. Then, I'm gonna move this through quickly, but part of the mindset in the budget was the extent to how do those allocations speak to the audit findings? I am not going to repeat the 236 page finding that all of you have, the summary, but there really are multiple areas in which each of these acts really are connected to those areas of focus, findings 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, the equality of curriculum, courses, access, and opportunity, which is area 3, and area 4, consistent intentional progress monitoring, which speaks to findings 4.1 and 4.3. And one of the things that I think Ms. Mosley needs to give him more credit for, because he kind of went through it relatively quickly, is the rationale that is required. We know it was labor intensive, but when Ms. Mosley talked about pushing out information, which was new, right? Even though we had put something together last year, pales in comparison to the level of specificity that was required when Ms. Mosley came and said, that's nice information, I'm glad you have it, but I need more in order to build this budget. So what you're seeing here are sample questions that were asked each of the budget builders, right? Which pathway does your potential expenditure most appropriately align? And they had to give explanation for why, not just a checkbox. I said, oh, it's pathway number 2. You're like, well, why is it pathway number 2? When we talked about what does that potential expenditure mean as it aligns to particular pathways. So we did have to go through, well, is it 1.1? Is it 1.2? Is it 1.3? So it forced individuals to be very specific with regards to their ask. And then the question, which is, we talked about a lot, object code. Please align it to the state object code in terms of that process. And more importantly, we know that asks are just that. What happens when you don't get it, right? The world can't come into a calamity and say, if I don't have it, I can't do anything. We're doomed, right? That's not the mentality that we want. We want to know that what other resources are you going to use? How are you going to maintain moving forward while thinking about, I didn't get it this year. These are some things I'm going to move around. I'm going to make my proposal again next calendar year and see where I am. And then obviously the alternative request in order to support that. So what we had is that 2 very critical areas that speak to the way in which we are moving. And it's obvious that in these requests, that for the phase 2 strategic plan, that staffing and curricular programming resources were the top 2. And that dollar amount is a wish list. When we added everything together, very similar to, I'll repeat it again, in a perfect world, that would be nice. Not coming anywhere near that number, literally impossible in terms of that. But we understand that there are resources that there were needed. So I wanted to share with you preliminarily, here were the asks. You see them there. Each budget manager gave on a separate sheet, a strong rationale for why they needed those positions, why it was connected to the strategic plan, and what happens if you don't get that position. And then on the curricular side, they had to speak to the extent in which, what does that mean for our math program? As you know, we are in need of a comprehensive K-5 math curriculum to replace the current math program. We have a lot of work to do in our social studies program, K-5 as well, along with at the secondary level. We also know that administration has been looking around the biggest Achilles heel, and that is time. When children are behind grade level, time is the enemy. And you can't produce more of it. And you gotta work within the time frame that you have. And one of the things we're looking at, and a pilot that we're looking to propose, and we built it in the budget just to say, let's see if we can do this, is we need to provide a before and after school experience for some of our most neediest children, which requires busing, right? Which requires staffing for the morning piece, and it requires support staff in terms of instructional aides who are gonna be assisting those educators in the classroom as well. And having been in a previous school district with a strong before and after school program that was aligned to what educators are doing inside the classroom, right? There's many before and after school programs, and they all have their benefits. This was specific to, yes, we want children to have fun, but we need to catch up on some of those or get them better prepared for the lesson that they're going to see today, tomorrow, or next week. So that's extremely important in terms of that intervention at the elementary level. So that before and after is really focused on our 3 elementary buildings. Part of the work around implementing new curriculum is a professional development that you're gonna need once you think about that new curriculum and the new resources. And then I spoke earlier about the technology infrastructure, the outdated monitors and smart boards that we need to think about. So those came to Ms. Mosley's desk, made sure that from her lens, they were appropriately facilitated. They came to my desk, went through those, and as we said, phase 1 and phase 3, build a budget. After that, we determined the extent in which what available resources are there. As we think about this, knowing that there is strong commitment from this board that we don't want to be anywhere near that 5%, 5.3 from that process, right? In terms of the parameters that were shared with me. And we want to try to bring a budget that has those components that fit within to that. At least that's the first stage, right? And then we can go back and figure out what else needs to be done. How do we look at this through a finer tooth comb? So I wanted to make sure that at least as we're building this, you understand that those 5 major components of that budget and phase 2 of the budget, so much of what was being asked for is we need more personnel. And the staff, our staff, are not asking if we need more people because they want to defer the responsibility. They need that because when you walk into classrooms and you see the differentiated instruction that needs to happen, you are going to need additional personnel to push in or to pull out some of our students who have those particular needs as well. So wanted to make sure that we provided that to you in context to how we're building the budget.
All right. Committee members, have any questions?
No, I mean, no, I don't really have a question. I did ask in my first committee meeting, a new guy question where I was surprised that we budgeted year to year. So this is outstanding to see because not only is the long-term, you have it as sort of a long-term mindset, but you've already put the pieces into place by creating these phases of having mandated obligation, which you could probably build a 3 or 5 year model of mandated obligation at this point, right? You have the strategic plan and mapping into the strategic plan, and you know which things you're gonna wanna do. So you've already laid groundwork tying into the strategic plan and then overlaying what we need in replacement or renewal and deferred maintenance. It is, I think we're further towards long-term mindset because of the work that you've done on the front end. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, not a question, but a comment. I was here last year during this process. They've been through these many years before that. And last year, what I thought this is what it would be like. It was not. So it's different. This is much better. Thank you for your work. And I think it has a trickle down effect in what you're doing. You're getting things squared away so that everybody else is starting to do the right thing. So thank you for getting this much more organized. It makes more sense. It's getting us right with the state, saving money where we can, putting resources where, so thank you for that. So this is much more what I thought the process would be like and the way it should be in the next 3 to 5 years. So thank you for that.
Oh, sorry.
Just one question. So first too, I want to thank you for the work on creating this foundation that I think is going to be really important for long-term success. Just one question. I know you're still working on these requests, but I'm just trying to remember back to last budget cycle, the literacy and math specialists, we took some moves in that direction.
Yes, we did.
This current academic year.
Yes, we did.
What did we invest in, remind me, in the current academic year on that front, and how would these requests sort of?
Yes, we knew that, the need for literacy and math specialists based on our data, was at the top of the list. We knew that we couldn't get all of those positions in one calendar year. So, the new positions we put in, the literacy specialists, the math specialists, in the elementary and middle school have significantly changed the way and provided breathing room for the number of students who need that level of support. Where we are, academically, and talking to staff in terms of the type of interventions and remediations that they want to do and spend more time with students, we need a couple more specialists there in order to facilitate some of that and reduce the opportunity gap. Remember, the gap, which I shared with this board, starts very early. And it exponentially increases year after year after year. If you do not have that really sweet spot of a window at the elementary level, to ensure that as they move to the middle school, that this doesn't become this. And I said that turning around student outcomes is not an impossibility at the later years, but it is compared to the radius of turning a speedboat and the radius of turning a cargo ship. Significant amount of circumference required, and do you have that window of time? So I always remember one of my former board members who said, the best way to eliminate the achievement gap is to make sure it doesn't happen. But we know children come into our system already behind, right? For factors that we can't control. We would love to see more universal pre-K as part of that budget conversation, because science does support that it significantly helps students. So those positions are really building blocks to what we knew the number we wanted, but realizing that we couldn't get that in one calendar school year. The idea of having the additional 0.5 was really helpful, but now that person's there, we realize that we've oversaturated them with the number of students, and they just can't be effective when they're seeing so many students in need.
Thank you for that.
I would just like to say thank you to Ms. Mosley, and I really feel like having 2 business people in the business office is really going to correct course, and I feel like we're in really good hands, so thank you.
Couple things. First, thank you, Ms. Thompson. Oh my God, I know what that object report looks like. All those codes, they're this many, if they were on paper. So thank you, and thank you for getting the training out to administrators so they can use it, and that should make your job easier in the future. So thank you. Next question, bus patrol. When is the equipment being installed, and how are we communicating that to our families as well as the wider community? Can we use like the Crime Watch website?
I don't want them to know. They'll run it till we get-
Because I just think it's a fair name.
Yeah, once we do plan on, obviously with Ms. Riley, pushing out additional information. In addition to, obviously, I know there's not everyone who is, watching some of our meetings, and as we encourage people to go and watch and listen to that, but, we do have a campaign to, if the board indeed, wants to move in this direction, apparently, looks like we may approve it, begin to put together communication at the building level and overall, in collaboration with, the transportation department as well. Yeah. Now, I do know that there are, and I know districts are very different, but on a tad note, a neighboring district, recently implemented bus patrol, a little bit larger than ours. And, I was shocked to be shared the number of violations in a 3-month period. The number would absolutely blow your mind in terms of that process, right? A little different, right? Larger district, a couple thousand more students than ours, but just couple more thousand, but then to realize like that, how is that possible? So indeed, it is happening at a much larger, at a much larger rate. And, one of the individuals told me within that 3-month window, even if we were to pay, we would have paid for all the equipment in the 3-month window in light of all the stuff that was happening. So it was shocking. But the idea about the bus patrol and the communication, regardless of what your violation is, there's a guarantee that if you don't have $150,000 worth of fines, they eat that, right?
No, I wasn't worried about that.
But I think I know you weren't, but, because we had conversations about what does that really mean? There's no expenses in terms of that process, and we wanted to clarify that. But the communication piece, we will push out at the district level, and at the building level as well.
And then my biggest question, and I say, keep going, just keep going, is the before and after school program, prioritizing that with full day kindergarten, in which would have more of an impact. Are you going for both? Or,
Well, I
you
think,
know,
I'd like to think that this may be a step a little bit closer to that conversation.
Mhm.
Full day kindergarten, though I support, does require a significant amount of long-term planning and commitment. The amount of additional staff that you're going to need, the amount of additional support staff that you are going to need is really a large commitment that we would have to decide where are we going to get those funds from? And there's no money tree in the back. There are trees, but there's no money tree. So you have to balance out what's important, because if we really want to do this, then you're gonna have to pull resources from other areas in order to fulfill that. And then the additional cost of space,
I know, I know.
right?
No.
You'll find the educators who are really committed and want to be here. Then you're gonna have to think about, once you do that, where is that going to look like? And the audit is, when you build it, they will come. And that is a big, big check plus for families who looking at comparable districts like ours and saying, what's the choice? And the winner is we're landing here because this offers something that others do not. So
Right.
you may want to be prepared for the influx
Oh, yeah.
of
Yes.
individuals coming in for that process.
But I do think the before and after school program is so needed for closing that achievement gap,
Yeah.
just as you're saying. I
Yeah.
think, go,
Yeah.
let's do it. That's it.
Thank you. Mary Jo did remind me, I did scribble down one question I forgot to ask, and it was about bus patrol. What was the decision about whether the scope of that contract? Were we doing new camera equipment inside the buses with them, or this is just the exterior?
This is both interior and
Both interior.
exterior cameras. So it gives an opportunity to replace some of our old aging infrastructure. Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Have they been installed?
No, sir, the board hasn't approved the contract.
Oh, I had the impression it was.
No.
Okay. Well, I would just encourage you to the board that we have a comprehensive rollout communication plan. And that there's other parties of interest, I'm sure, you know, the police and everybody in the area supportive of it, and whatever piece that our communications department writes up, you know, because we know there's gonna be people opposed and, you know, just totally opposed to this, but I think I would support it and think it's a good thing, but we ought to have that plan.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're being naive to the pushback. And there's a way of putting the right spin on it. And I'm assuming we're not budgeting anything for it, no revenue. It'll be revenue neutral. So any money that we get is,
Again, like I said, we're using this to establish a baseline. It's not an existing revenue source, so it wouldn't be beneficial for us to budget. for
well, even
something.
going forward, it's kind of
Yes.
found money.
Exactly.
Yeah, Chris Henry Lane. Dr. Marseille, when you were looking at staffing.
Sure.
The strategic plan,
Yeah,
I don't believe you mentioned, if you did, I missed it.
Sure.
You listed, 2 teachers on special assignment.
yes.
What, did I miss that? What are they?
No, thank you for bringing, that up. So what we were looking at in terms of, and this is specific at the elementary. We wanted to provide an opportunity. We've had TOSAs before, teachers on special assignment. This plays a dual role. And it fulfills some of the objectives of, some of our findings, which is building leadership capacity within our buildings. We talked about, aspiring leaders in, teachers who are moving forward with their leadership certification, who want opportunities to lead. But we're also looking for individuals who also, have a strong acumen for instructional leadership. And what those individuals would do is play a dual role in supporting the building principal and particular leadership duties, but also allow the opportunity for the principal to get into instructional spaces a lot more. So what we are finding is the balance, as you are aware of, are you leading instructionally or are you managing? And there are some tasks that we believe with some additional support at the elementary, it would create a balance for that. We're looking at a 2-year rotation. So we would ask someone who's really interested in taking on this leadership role, that it be pulled out their classroom for 2 years. And then we'll continue that rotation for other staff members. But they do play a dual role in supporting the that principal with administrative duties, but also supporting the classroom instruction as well.
So so there's 2 of them, but there's 3 elementary schools. So will
Yes.
elementary school not have one, or?
We tried, you know, that's a good question. When we looked at the data, and each of these positions are about, what does the data say about which schools have the greatest need? We've identified 2 schools with the greatest need for those TOSAs. The conversation is to the extent in which, when it's possible, could one of those individuals do a rotation where you're 2 days here and then the rest of the 3 days you're at one building? But it also can work in terms of trying to see what does that look like in those 2 buildings, and then moving forward next year to saying, you know, we found some great success in that, and we might want to do that for the 3rd building. But there are 2 buildings in terms of the data we're seeing, where, in my mind, I said, I know the 2 places where exactly where those individuals want to go, but being mindful that not that the 3rd building doesn't need it and wouldn't benefit from it. It's the idea that based on the flexibility of our dollars, we'd have to try to prioritize that.
So the staffing part of this, the expenditure part would actually be, because these are, I assume, teachers we already have in the
Yes.
building.
Yes,
So that's not adding to the positions would be replacing them in the classroom.
yes. So we'd have an LTS in that 2-year window.
I have one more question if I could.
Oh, please, yes.
In the draft financial statements issued in January, I noticed that there's something called OPEB, other post-employment benefits, and it describes a medical insurance for retirees. Is there any way to get more information about that? How, is it in the CBA? Or is there a way to find out more information about who qualifies? Looks like we have 525 active employees who would qualify, 99 retirees currently enrolled. And it's a plan that doesn't issue a financial report. I'm wondering why that's the case. But,
So, I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So that is based on CBA, existing CBAs when people retired, whatever, would be, depending on when they retire, what benefits they were eligible for post-retirement. So a lot of that information is actually in our GASB reports. So again, we can make that information available, but
It's not available, just to clarify, because is it available online already on the district website, or would I just come to the business office and request a copy?
yeah, you can come to the business office. I'm not sure if it's something historically the district has put on the website, but those are the GASB reports that are done. They're done every 2 years.
Okay, is the CBA language there, like the employee?
No, there's no existing CBA.
Okay, it's not in the CBA at all? It's not
I don't
mentioned in the
believe
CBA at all?
it is in the
I don't, no,
CBA.
I'm saying, I don't think the CBAs are posted, depending on when a person retires, what benefits they were eligible for. The district is financially obligated to honor those benefits upon their retirement.
But is the language inside the collective bargaining agreement?
Yes. The language for what they are eligible for?
Yeah.
Yes, that would have been in their agreement upon their retirement.
Okay, so I would come to this office.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have just kind of a couple of things. Real quick. Or do we ever intend to bring graduation back on campus? I mean, we moved it out in 2006 or 7 with the intention of bringing it back. But we never bring it. I mean,
That has not been a conversation that's been brought to my attention, from high school, administration, but I definitely will follow up, but it's not something that has been brought up.
I
to
can't
me.
remember the circumstances behind why that decision was made. It escapes me. I was on
Okay.
I don't remember, but I'm curious, instead of spending 13 grand at Newman, it'd be nicer to have it here on our own facility, our brand new, everything. Do you-
I can answer that
I
for you.
can't remember. I can't remember.
It is because the weather is so iffy. And if we go to our auditorium, if we have to move it indoors, families could only have 2 tickets. And so families that have, 6 members, grandparents want to come, it was impossible for the number of families to be in our auditorium that would want to attend.
But outside we could accommodate.
Outside we could, but we had a series of year after year of inclement weather, lightning for sure, and,
Metal bleachers, yeah,
Yeah.
bad idea.
it's a bad.
But I'm just throwing that out there, just wondering if we can re-explore that. Another thing, I have to tell a story, sorry, I won't spend forever. I had to spend a few minutes talking about this school board member 25 years ago, where he used to ask way too many questions and would get ribbed for it. And one of the questions was an analogy he used to make year after year. And it's something you're trying to address now. And I thank you for it. I used to ask, you asked for $100, hypothetically, $100 for bus last year. There you go. The following year has come up. The $100 was spent. But this board member would say, and the new budget would say, I need 100 plus inflation. I need 106 going forward. But this board member would ask, well, how was the 100 used? And we'd find out 90 was used on books and 10 was transferred elsewhere. And then I would say, you're starting at 90 and you're getting inflation then. So it's, and you're kind of, sounds like you're trying to do that. And I appreciate that. that's a 25-year fight in the school district. Because we just take the previous year's number and just add to it. And we have to look at what those numbers really truly mean and how they were used. And I appreciate the fact that you're doing that. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I fully thumbs up for that. So one was easy, one was a compliment, now it's in normal day. I
You
handed
should
out
you should have
earlier.
started with that first and we would end on the compliment and adjourn the meeting.
That's just not my style. That's not- I handed everyone, my fun sheet of what I call overestimations of budgets, budget expenditures for the last 25 years. And I added a column to the right that I haven't had there before. And that column basically was, what is the value of a 1% increase in taxes? So my numbers are pretty close. They might not be 100% close, but they're close. You know, hand grenades, close is good. But basically what I'm trying to show you this. Those are the 1% increases. And the overestimations are based off of the audits. 11 out of the 15 previous years, we've had, all 15 years, we've been over budgeted. We've overestimated our expenditures significantly 11 out of the 15 years. 4 years, I'm gonna give the school district a pass and say they were pretty good years. Pretty good budgets. And of those 11 that I think were too high, 3 of them were in the $2 to $3 million range, and the remainder were 1 million plus. And when you add up in the aggregate, we show an overestimation over the last 15 years of $21.6 million. And that, on average, is $1.45 million. I've always asked, since I've moved back to the school district 6.5 years ago, that we try to sharpen our pencils. You've heard it a million times. I know board members have. To make sure our expenditures are as close, our budgeted expenditures are truly as close as we think they really are going to be. Because if we overestimate them, we're gonna have a higher tax increase. So once again, back in May and June, I bugged you guys about where are we year-to-date numbers. Now, I also heard we had a lot of issues going on in the business office, and I understand that. But I am here on behalf of the taxpayers and not the business office, that our jobs need to be done correctly. And I'm not giving anyone any more outs. If we've had problems, it should have been fixed. And it took a while to fix them. But in my estimation, the taxpayers paid for it dearly. So this past year, back in May and June, when I was begging, what are our year-to-date expenditure projections? We kind of really didn't get them. The budget was passed for this year we're presently in, and you know I wasn't happy. And here we go and get the audit done, and we didn't know in May and June that our investments and our transfer taxes and all those other revenues were coming up much better than we anticipated. So you've got better revenues, you have lesser expenditures. Come May, June last year, we could have changed that. What did we make it a 4.3? What was the tax increase last year?
4.3.
Or whatever it was, it could have gone down. And if we didn't know in May and June that our revenues were better than don't we check I check my checkbook. I still have a checkbook and my accounts, making sure where my money is. Am I doing better? Am I doing worse? And we never knew that our revenues were going to be that good. I don't buy it. And we didn't know that our expenditures were gonna come in less than our budget. I don't buy it. The 4.1 probably should have been a 3% tax increase. Honestly, there's no excuse. And if we have a 5.3% increase coming up, it's heartless. It's heartless to the seniors in this community, and I mean the senior citizens who are on fixed incomes. I'm gonna say it again, sharpen that pencil. Those expenditures need to be as close as possible. Those revenues need to be as close as possible, because those tax increases need to reflect or need to cover what the superintendent said to me last year. And it is our intent to cover our costs, not dump money into reserves. We have $18 million in reserves now. It's the biggest number that we've had in, I believe, the last 15 years, plus a couple of projects that, we had to write the last few check for NDA or West, whichever construction projects. We need to do a better job. And by the way, in the last 6 years, I've never asked for a teacher to be cut, a program to be cut, anything to be cut, because I appreciate the education that our children get. But I sure as hell want the business office and the people that manage the finances to do a better job, so folks like us can afford to continue to live in this community, and you don't drive us out. I'm so upset about, I predicted that audit was gonna be like that. I couldn't predict the revenue because I didn't have that information. But I'm not surprised. We have a history of doing what I think is a terrible job. Some people, like our auditors, will say, oh, we're within 5%, that's good. Well, when we're one of the highest millage or the highest millage school district in the county of Delaware County, we shouldn't tap ourselves on the shoulders. We need to do a better job. My rant is over, thank you. Oh, one last thing on that sheet. This is curious to me, maybe you folks might want to look into it. The sheet I gave you has an asterisk in the 14-15 year, the 15-16 year, the 19-20 year, and the 20-21 year. What's curious about those 4 years is that our revenues came in better than we budgeted, and our expenditures were less than we budgeted. So in other words, you would think positive money. All of those years, our revenues minus our expenditures, we were in the negative. I'd really love to understand what the heck happened in those 4 years when you would have think we would have added money to the reserves, but the opposite happened. I'm not gonna say anything else. You should really look into those 4 school years. Thank you.
I think that's it. Yeah.
No.
Well, from the meeting, or what? Yes.
Our next,
I am.
our next finance committee meeting is March 6th, 2024. In this room, immediately following the facility year. You adjourn.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.